It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Good afternoon, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC Talk Radio. I am pleased to be your host, Stephen Moore. We are on this wonderful station, WABC Talk Radio, every Saturday afternoon following the great Larry Kudlow from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. And for those who are new to the show, we talk about politics, we talk about the economy, we talk about the financial markets, and all things related to you making more money. I am so thrilled to have this show. We went to 2 hours a few weeks ago, and it has been a roaring success. And I've got to tell you that it is the highlight of my weekend to be able to be in front of this microphone talking to you all every Saturday afternoon. And thank you for the regular listeners who, and by the way, we have listeners all over the country. I am so shocked when I hear people tell me they're listening to the show in Florida, and they're listening to the show in Oregon, and they're listening to the show in Denver, Colorado, and Chicago. And so it's really cool how many people all over the country are listening to the show, either on WABC or other affiliated stations or online. So please continue to listen and tell your friends. I mean, if they're not listening to More Money, are they really your friends? And so I want to start this conversation. By the way, we have a great show today. We have some fantastic guests. We have John McLaughlin, who's one of the top pollsters in the country, who's going to give us a feel for what's happening in this crazy presidential race. We're going to talk to Monica Crowley, who Monica from Fox News, and she was a deputy assistant secretary at the Treasury Department for Donald Trump. And my friend Bob Nardelli, who was the CEO of Home Depot for many years, to talk about the economy. So it's going to be a fun show this afternoon. And by the way, we're different from almost all of the other shows on the weekend. I mean, if you do not change your dial, but if you were to turn on other stations, you're probably going to hear just canned commercials and infomercials that are so boring. And we have live programming on this show, and we have real guests that are going to tell you about really interesting stuff. So I'm so pleased at the success of the show, and those of you who are listening have helped me make this show a success. All right, I want to talk a little bit to start out the show, talking about what's going on with the political situation. And I guess the big news this week was that Kamala Harris chose Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, as her running mate. Now, even my Democratic friends, and I, believe it or not, I do have Democratic friends. I'm a Trump guy. I will admit that. But I appreciate, by the way, that we have so many independents and Democrats who listen to the show, because I like to hear from people with all different kind of political persuasions on this show. But even my Democratic friends are kind of rolling their eyes now, saying, wow, why did we pick this guy? He is pretty far out there to the left. As the Wall Street Journal said in their editorial, this is probably the most left-wing ticket ever in American history. When you when you pair up Kamala Harris, as you all know, was the most liberal voting record in the United States Senate, even to the left of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. Now, that's a pretty left-wing position. I didn't even know you could get to the left of those two, but somehow Kamala managed to do so. And then you take this Governor Tim Walz, and frankly, I didn't really know that much about him until he was picked, and I started looking at his record. And my God, I mean, this guy, first of all, on COVID, he was a total disaster. He shut down the entire Minnesota economy for over 6 months at a time when Florida was open, Tennessee was open, Utah was open, most of the southern states were open. And as you all know, if you're a regular listener of this show, lockdowns were a complete failure. More people died from lockdowns than were saved in terms of lives saved from COVID, because lockdowns didn't work, but they did cause a lot of social problems. They caused a lot of increases in drug use and alcoholism and loneliness and depression, and did great damage to our children. I mean, how dare the government shut down our schools so that kids lost, in many cases, over a year of learning, which is something that will affect them their whole lives. But not only did Walz shut down the economy and the schools and the churches in Minnesota, but then you probably heard about this, but I want to repeat it again because I'm just shocked at how outrageous and disgusting and destructive this is, that Tim Walz actually had a phone line run by the government, an emergency line that people could call in, and it was what people are calling a snitch line. And so let's say one of your neighbors, you saw one of your neighbors during COVID outside, maybe playing, baseball or catch with their kids. You were supposed to call in on the snitch line and rat on your neighbors and say, oh, I saw my neighbor outside. He was within 3 feet of his kids, or talking to another neighbor. And come on, who does that? I mean, first of all, who would call into a line and snitch on their neighbors? But the fact that Tim Walz set this thing up is really amazing to me. And it tells you a lot about what a kind of Stalinist this guy is in terms of his political power. Can you imagine someone like that being president of the United States? And as you know, if Kamala was to win the election, and I do not think she will, but if she did, he would be one heartbeat away from the Oval Office. And I mean, God, who sets up snitch lines? Who would do that? And who would call in? Do you know people would actually call in and rat on their neighbors because they were outside or they were too close to, a family member or a kid or a friend? I hope that doesn't happen in the United States, that we're more neighborly than that. But the other thing I wanted to mention was, if you look at his economic record, it's terrible. He was a big spender. He took over at a time when the state had a budget surplus. He turned it into a massive deficit. He is against fossil fuel use. He wants to get rid of gas cars. He checks all the boxes, all the kind of crazy liberal ideas out there. He signed up for them, folks, and he's instituted that in the state of Minnesota. And so what's happened in Minnesota since he's been governor is, guess what? People are leaving Minnesota and they're going to the southern states, or they're going to some of the mountain states where you don't have the kind of craziness. But I don't understand how you could have a ticket. And this is an amazing thing. The Democratic ticket now of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, between the two of them, neither of them has had a full-time job in the private sector. Neither of them have actually worked for a private business. Now, Tim Walz, I think at one point was a high school football coach, but he's never worked for a business. Neither has Kamala. And that's pretty scary. Two people that would be the top of our government who know nothing about business. And incidentally, I wasn't talking about the fact that they didn't start a business. I'm talking about the fact that they have not ever worked for a business. They've never earned a private sector paycheck. I'm sorry, I have a problem with that, because these are the people who are going to try to tell businesses what to do. Now, let me talk for a minute about the latest with Kamala, because this one's a bit of a piece of work as well. So she made an announcement late last week that she has a plan. She has a plan, folks, to deal with the inflation problem. She went on, she had one of her rambling speeches about how inflation is hurting people. Yeah, I certainly agree with that. I've only been saying that for almost 4 years on this show, that we have a big, big problem with inflation. Everybody knows it. The prices are 20% higher, and the things that you have to buy, your necessities of life, are up by 25 or 30% in cost. I mean, everyone knows that. And she's finally catching on to the fact that, whoops, we got an inflation problem under the Biden-Harris regime. And so she gave a speech where she said, I will have on day one of the Kamala Harris presidency, which would be, she would be sworn in, I think it's January 21st of 2025. She has a plan to deal with inflation. She's going to conquer inflation. Now, I don't know how she's going to do it, but here's what I find ironic about this. Wait a minute. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have been in the White House for, I don't know the exact number, but somewhere near about 1,200 days. They've been in office for about 1,200 days. And just now they're going to deal with inflation. Now they have a plan after the inflation have gone up by 20%. And by the way, if she has a plan, if she and Joe Biden have a plan, why don't they put that in place now? Why would they wait another 4 months for this secret plan that they have? And I think the answer to that is they don't have any plan. They don't know how to reduce prices and bring them down. In fact, they don't want to produce more energy. They don't want to allow the free enterprise system to flourish. Now, she does have one plan. I will give her credit. She does have one plan to deal with inflation. It's not going to work, but it is a plan. And here it is. She wants to institute price controls on businesses, grocery stores and 7-Eleven stores and McDonald's and businesses like Home Depot to deal with the price problem. So in other words, she's not blaming herself. She's not blaming Joe Biden. She's not blaming the $5 trillion spending spree that she and the Democrats launched when Biden became president. And she, by the way, she cast the tie-breaking votes for 2 of those massive $1 trillion spending bills. She's not blaming that. She's blaming the greedy corporations. The ones, they're selfish because they keep raising their prices. So she wants to put price controls on. Now, those of you in New York who are listening, and I know many of you in the New York area know that price controls never work. When you try to do like rent price controls and things of that nature, all you do is create shortages. And so that's why you had homeless people on the streets in New York. There was no new housing because landlords wouldn't build housing when the government was controlling the housing prices, and they couldn't charge the rent that they wanted to. And so all of a sudden you had a massive shortage of housing. Now, there is one thing that almost all economists would agree on, those on the left, those on the middle, and those more on the free enterprise side of the equation that I'm on. Almost all good economists would agree that price controls are always a mistake. Price controls do not lower prices. They just create shortages of goods and services. And with respect to rent control, what happened is you had a privileged few who got in these rent control apartments and condos, and they lived, $200 a month. They had a great deal, but nobody else got that deal. So these people, there you got still people in New York who've lived for 25 or 30 years in these apartments. They won't leave because they're grandfathered in with these sweet deals under rent control, while the rest of the people in the city can't find anything and have to live in cardboard boxes because there's not enough affordable housing. So I think we're up against some people who don't understand economics. We're up against a team that believes very fervently in big government. I don't think they have a solution to any of our economic plans. And I'll end this soliloquy with one last point. We saw what happened over the last week and a half with the seesawing of the stock market, where Friday we got a terrible jobs market, then a jobs report, then the economy, the crash in the stock market on Friday, and then the crash of the stock market all over the world over the weekend, and then the market crashed again on Monday, and then the market calmed itself, and the market's been up, quite a bit then, and making up for most of the losses, not all the losses, but many of the losses that were incurred previously. Now, here's the point. What that whole episode tells us is that we have an incredibly precarious and fragile economy right now. And this could happen again. When's the next time we're going to see another meltdown? And sometimes when you get these meltdowns, the economy doesn't come back. And I've said so many times on this show, and I'll say it again, there will be a financial crisis in this country if we stay on the course we're on. I guarantee it. Now, I can't tell you when it's going to happen. It could happen in 3 days. It could happen in 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, maybe 5 years from now. But it will happen, and it will cause severe pain and suffering to the American people, and especially people in the middle class. There was a great piece in the Wall Street Journal this week from my friend Jeff Yass, who runs Susquehanna Capital in Philadelphia, saying, rich people didn't get clobbered by inflation. The rich people did just fine. The people who suffered from the high inflation of the first 3.5 years of the Biden administration have been middle class and working class and lower income people. They're the ones who are financially stressed out. And unfortunately, folks, Kamala Harris has no plan. She says she has a plan, but the plan that she has announced, as I just explained to you, will not work. If you want to control prices, you have to do two things. You have to have the Fed control the money supply, and they haven't done a very good job of that. And the second thing you need is for the federal government, Congress and the White House, to get federal debt and spending under control. And unfortunately, neither party really wants to do that today. The Democrats don't want to cut spending. The Republicans don't much have an appetite for cutting spending. But I guarantee you, if we don't get this spending down and the private sector growth rate up, we are headed to a financial crisis. I'm not trying to be Armageddon. I'm not just trying to scare people. I don't want people jumping out of windows. But what I'm saying is it's going to be painful if we don't deal with this. In other words, let me kind of use an analogy. We've got the Titanic, and the Titanic is headed to that iceberg. The Titanic is steaming towards the iceberg. And what I'm saying is, hey, turn it around before we hit the iceberg. And Kamala is saying, full speed ahead. And folks, that is the prescription for an economic disaster. I'll be right back with my first guest today. This is the More Money Show. I hope you're having a wonderful weekend. And this is WABC.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC Talk Radio. We are on every Saturday noon on this wonderful station from 1 to 3 p.m. So proud to be able to follow the great Larry Kudlow as we enter our second hour for the program. Before I get to some of my guests, I wanted to just talk about a few kind of fun issues that I think you will find. I think you'll find them in some cases humorous, and in some cases they may bring tears to your eyes. But I want to make sure all of you who are listening to this show get the More Money hotline that you go to unleashprosperity.com and sign up for our hotline that comes out every morning for 5 mornings a week. It's an email that we send out. Very popular. The senators read it. The congressmen read it. I know Donald Trump occasionally reads it. He'll tweet out some of the items in our hotline. He finds it to be of great value. I think you will too. My friend Newt Gingrich reads it. I spoke to the Republican senators at their policy lunch the other day, and about half of them said, hey, we read the hotline every day. So you should read it too. And to get the hotline, which is free, just go to unleashprosperity.com and sign up, and we will start sending it to you. And by the way, there's no advertisements. I'm not going to take a penny of your money because it is absolutely free. I just want the people who listen to this show to be the smartest people in the room when you are debating some of your friends on politics or policy or economics. Well, let me just talk in the few minutes that we have before I get to my guests about a few things that I find really kind of interesting stories, because I like to dig these up, and I think they tell you a lot about where the country is headed. One of them is this headline from a left-wing publication that I read quite often because I like to know what the other side is saying. And for those of you who are new to the program, I'm a free market guy. I love freedom. I like free enterprise, and I like a government that is very small and very non-intrusive in our life. But here's the headline from this left-wing rag. Forget the wealth tax. We should abolish extreme wealth altogether. This is the headline. Forget the wealth tax. We should abolish extreme wealth altogether. In other words, what they're saying is we shouldn't just tax people at like 50 or 60 or 70% when they make a lot of money. We should just take it from them. We should just confiscate the money from them. I mean, this is right out of Batman, right? It's right out of the what Cuba did when Castro took over. They just took things from people if they were too wealthy. And the fact that you have some, reasonably minded people, or people that you think are reasonable in a reasonable magazine, say that we should confiscate people's wealth and take it all away, take away their cars, take away their mansions, take away their money in their bank accounts. This is really scary stuff, folks. And I don't even think Bernie Sanders wants to do that. I mean, he wants an 80 or 70 or 80 or 90% tax rate. But this would be like essentially if somebody steals something from you, they've taken 100% of what you have. So that's pretty amazing to me. This is the radicalism that we're up against in the Democratic Party. The second story I wanted to mention to you, and I kind of got a kick out of this, and I wonder what you all think about it. My good friend Nancy Pelosi, and I'm saying that tongue in cheek, but she was, of course, the Speaker of the House for many years. She put out a statement early this week, and some of you may have heard about this, but if you didn't, I think it'll make you laugh. Nancy Pelosi said, "Put Joe Biden on Mount Rushmore." Put Joe Biden on Mount Rushmore. So I think we're going to probably put Joe Biden right in between George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. Because he's such a great president. He's done amazing things for our country, like 20% inflation, like losing control of our border, like facilitating 2 wars around the world, both of which we're losing at this point. Really? Joe Biden is one of our greatest presidents, according to Nancy Pelosi? I mean, I don't know whether to laugh or cry when I read that, but I think she was being absolutely serious. She said that, I want to see if I've got a quote here. Here's what she said, so you can understand that I'm not just making this up. She said, she was asked about Joe Biden's presidency. She said, quote, "Such a consequential president of the United States." She was gushing when she said it. Quote, "A Mount Rushmore kind of president of the United States." That's she's talking about Joe Biden, folks. Now, I actually happen to think that Ronald Reagan would be a good addition to the Mount Rushmore, because I think he is one of our 5 greatest presidents. And I think, with Washington and Lincoln and Jefferson and I think the fourth one is well, let's see, you got Lincoln, you got Lincoln, Washington, and you've got obviously Jefferson up there, and let's put Reagan up there too. I'd love to see that with TR. The other thing I wanted to point out to you is that Google lost a lawsuit this week. And I hate big government. I hate regulators. And I'm not even a big fan of Google. Sometimes they kind of censor the stuff that we want to put on Google. But Google is a free service. They provide the search engine for free. It costs you nothing. It's one of the most amazing bargains in the history of mankind. I can go to my laptop computer or even my iPhone and use Google and put in a phrase, and they will find out for me everything I want to know about it with essentially one click of the button on my phone. That's incredible. My first job in Washington 40 years ago was hanging out in the stacks at the Library of Congress trying to find statistics. I'd spend all afternoon looking up statistics that I can now find in about 25 seconds on Google. So Google is an amazing bargain for consumers, but the Justice Department sued them for monopoly practices, because what happened was that Apple, that makes the phones, had a deal with Google that if you bought an Apple phone or an Apple computer, the default search engine would be Google. Now, that's fine. I mean, what's wrong with that? Apple and Google have a financial arrangement, and they will provide each other services. I think that's fine. It's like, remember when you used to buy those personal computers when the personal computers came out and they said Intel inside? Was that a violation of antitrust that there was an Intel microprocessor in the Apple computer or the Microsoft computer? I mean, come on. This is not a monopoly. This is just good business practice that leads to the service that they want. And by the way, I think most people want the Google search engine. If you want to, when you buy an Apple computer or an Apple phone, you can change the search engine to Bing or any other one you want, but people want Google. And again, I'm not a big fan of Google in terms of their search engine. I like it, but I think sometimes they discriminate against conservatives. But my point is that it's their product, and we cannot not allow the government to intervene in these kinds of private business decisions. That is a bad idea. It's going to weaken the American economy. And they want to, you've got too many people like at the Federal Trade Commission and all these government agencies that want to weaken our technology industries. And if you do that, you're just going to give more power to China. So China is going to be the big winner of this, not American companies. It's not going to save American jobs. It's not going to save you money. It's going to probably cost you money. So shame on the courts for basically saying that Google is acting like a monopoly. How can it be a monopoly? Monopolies are supposed to cost higher prices, but this is a monopoly that's lowering prices. So it doesn't make any sense to me. Let's keep the government out of it. Let's maintain the best and most commanding lead in technology industries in the world. We have 5 of the 6 best technology companies. When you look at Apple and Google and Amazon and NVIDIA, we're blowing our competition away because we don't have government involvement. And I say, keep the government hands off the internet, keep the government hands off the search engines, and let the free enterprise system work. Okay, I'm going to get off my soapbox now. Great show ahead, folks. Stay tuned. This is the More Money Show on WABC.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC Talk Radio. My first guest this afternoon is a longtime friend and a brilliant political mind and one of the best pollsters in the country. That is the reason that Donald J. Trump has hired John McLaughlin to be one of his pollsters, because as we all know, Trump always hires the best. John, you've been in the business for, 20, 30, 40 years. You and I
over
have known each other a long time.
Yeah.
40, yeah. Well, I just turned 64. I came to Washington in 1984. So that's amazing, 40 years. And I think that's about when I first met you. Okay, let's get right down to it. Thanks for joining, John. Mm-hmm. So a lot of my Republican friends are in a kind of tizzy right now about what's going on. The polls showing that big lead that Trump had about 3 or 4 weeks ago has basically evaporated. And so there's a lot of nervous Nellies out there on the Republican side of the aisle. How do you rate this rate right now? How do you handicap things? And let's start with that.
Well, the poll I trust the most is my own. And we've done a monthly poll, not for the Trump campaign, but for our clients that we put out every month, and it's published on our website, McLaughlinOnline.com. And we put it out last week, and Trump was up 2 points. And the ironic part was, on June 26th, the day before the debates, Trump was up nationally by 2 points over Biden in our poll. And it's modeled after the 2020 turnout. So it has more Democrats. It has 4 points more Biden voters in it. It's so it reflects the 160 million people who came out in 2020. So we haven't had the big swings that you've seen in these other polls, but she had a honeymoon over the past couple of weeks. And the interesting thing about our poll that had Trump up to, Trump wins the debate huge, clocks Biden on the issues. He didn't get enough credit. He knew the issues inside out. People agree with him. That's what made Biden look bad. Not that the Democrats cared about Biden, but in the short run, a lot of the Democrats that polls that are more volatile, they were showing Biden losing us losing to Trump by more, and all of a sudden they started, let's get rid of the guy. And then Trump miraculously survives by the grace of God, an assassin's bullet. We have a great convention in Milwaukee. The party's unified. And 3 weeks ago, all of a sudden, Biden withdraws. It picks Kamala Harris. And we take the poll and we release it last week, and Trump's up too. It's like none of this ever happened. Trump's base is rock solid, and it's intense, and they're likely to get out. The Democrats, we saw in our poll, in our national poll, that among black voters, Trump went down from 28% to 18%. So she was getting more of those voters. We held about the same with Hispanics. White voters, we went up. Biden, we were only beating 51-40. Against Harris, we were winning 56-38. And what was the biggest jump was in rural areas, because, Harris does well in San Francisco. Big cities, big liberal cities. So in rural areas where we were leading Biden 52-38, all of a sudden we're leading Harris 62-33. So
a lot of so it's a competitive race, but Trump has a lead, and I think that's right. Is that a pretty good summary of the situation?
Yes. Okay. And you see that in the Real Clear Politics average of the polls that have come out.
So I bet a lot of our listeners don't trust polls because oftentimes the polls are wrong. And that, John, as you know, the polls were dramatically wrong in 2016 when every poll had him down by 6, 8, 10 points, and then he ends up winning on election day. By the way, why do you think the polls were so wrong in 2016?
Oh, you're seeing it again, the same reason. And by the way, I had to fight this for years. I've worked with President Trump. I advised him since 2011 when he first looked at this, and then worked with him in the 15 and the 16 race and the 2020 race. And I tell you, remember all the media polls in 2016 where we were trailing in the national popular vote, and they're saying it's a Hillary lock. I got in trouble with the guys because on election day, I'm on Sean Hannity's radio show and I'm on these other TV shows, and I'm saying it's election day in 2016. I'm saying Trump's going to win, but it's going to be very close. And they're like, they're nuts. Like 538 has it, a Hillary lock. And then in 2020, they're saying it's
wait, hold on. Time out. Hold on, John. So you were one of the few people who was saying that Trump was going to win when everybody else was saying, and I mean, look, I thought I was working for Trump in 2016. I didn't believe that he had no chance, but I would have probably said he had about a 1 in 3 chance of winning, and he ended up winning. And now how is it that you saw something in the polls that the others didn't see?
Well, I was working for the campaign, so I had the inside poll. Yeah. We had our own polls, and I'm very strict. Yeah. I do have an MBA in quantitative methods and finance from Fordham, and so with the polls, you got to be very careful where you sample, where you pick, make sure that you model it after previous elections and likely elections, and then you have to have quality controls while you're doing it, and then you got to check it when it comes off to make sure that it really makes sense. And we, back in 2016, we had polls that we could win Pennsylvania, we could win Michigan, we could win Wisconsin. They were really close, but it was like, there was 139 million votes that year, and by 78,000 votes, 44,000 in Pennsylvania, 22,000 in Wisconsin, and 10,000 in Michigan, we were able to win. And
but then John, hold on. But then he lost those states in 2020. Yeah. So how does he win them back in 2024?
Well, he wins them back through a pro-growth optimistic message that you've helped him with. And also by those states, a lot of those battleground states, there isn't that much polling yet, but they've always been close. But let me tell you, this is a lot better than 2016 and a lot better than 2020, where we were losing, and we were losing in a lot of those battleground states, and we had to make it up. And to Donald Trump's credit, I mean, in 2016, he was doing 5 or 6 cities a day. He was,
I traveled a bit with him. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and go to the media polls. The media polls. There was recently an Economist YouGov poll where they said that we were down 2 to Kamala Harris. They had 38% Democrat to only 28% Republicans. The exit polls in 2020 said it was 37 Democrat, 36 Republican. In 2016, it was 36 Democrat, 33 Republican. We haven't been under 30% of the vote since the 20th century. And every point you take the Republicans down, you're taking Trump down a point. So that poll that had us up by 2, if it was modeled after a real election turnout, would have Trump ahead. And you had another one, the CBS YouGov poll last weekend. They had 31% liberal. The exit polls in 2020 were 23 liberal. They had 30% conservative, and we were 38% on election day. Yeah. So it was a 16-point ideological swing against us to have him down a point or down 3 points, whatever. It's just you're seeing bad polls that are trying to suppress our vote instead of get the Democrats excited and suppress our voters. You're seeing that go on right now.
My kind of amateur take on this election is that Kamala Harris is probably more popular today than she'll be, an election day, right? I mean, most Americans are, they like the idea of a black woman on the ticket, and it's exciting, and she's got a charming smile and that kind of thing. But I don't know, John, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I don't think people really realize how radical her positions are on the major issues of the day. Would you agree or disagree?
Absolutely, because if you watch CNN, if you watch MSNBC, or you don't watch any information news channels, you don't know where she stands. I mean, you don't know that she was the. By the way, there's a recent poll out. Only half the voters in the country know that she was the border czar of the Biden administration.
They didn't know. They don't know that.
They don't know that, and that was a Matt Towery, Cahaly Insider Advantage poll.
Wow!
And
wow!
They don't know that. Half the voters don't know, and the media is already. President Trump the other day had a great press conference, and he was getting out the facts, and CNN's busy fact checking him after it's done to talk about, we're not in a depression. It's like it's right. Like it's like Pravda. It's like you got the government funded media is basically only telling positive things about Harris. She picks Walz. That was her first big mistake of the campaign. It looks like, because he's more radical than she is, and that's hard to do.
Right.
I mean, they're both for sanctuary states, sanctuary cities. They're both for government health care and tuition for illegals. And they're both for the largest tax increase in the history of the United States. Yeah. How often have you heard the media talk about when the tax cuts that you helped President Trump bring about, when the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs bill expires, it's the largest tax increase in the history of the United States that will raise taxes on 91% of all people, and the voters don't know it. And Trump's talking about no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security. I mean, he's talking about growing the economy again. So we need a solid contrast of what Trump did when he was president compared to her radical policies.
So great point. I couldn't agree more. That's why we put out our document that compares side by side. You go to unleashprosperitynow.com and you can find the chart book that shows, I don't know if you've seen that yet, John, but 25 side by side of Trump versus Biden Harris on everything from employment to inflation to interest rates to small business, and Trump's Kamala and Biden on each one of those. Okay. By the way, I'm talking to the great pollster, John McLaughlin. Appreciate your time this afternoon, John. So what is it? Let's get to the crux of the matter. What worries me, John, is people like my sisters, who I love and adore, but they're not Donald Trump voters. They don't like Trump, but I think they're gettable. They're gettable. I mean, they're not crazy liberals. So and I think in 2016, a lot of these, women, suburban women, at the end of the day, did vote for Trump, but then they didn't vote for him in 2020. How does he win those suburban moms who maybe, they don't like Trump's style? He's a little too flashy, bombastic, but they like his policies. How would you advise Trump to win those voters?
Well, by the way, your newsletter is great. I read it every day. It's like
thank you, John.
No, because it's substance. I deal in polls and politics. That's substance abuse. So we have to, the facts. Our side. We have to be right about the facts. But it comes down to the facts. When you're talking about getting suburban women, which I've seen some recent gains among, because when we talk inflation, when we talk about keeping you safe in your home with crime, because the suburbs are now worried about crime, because Kamala Harris is a cashless bail Democrat who wanted to defund the police and actually raise money to let out, this Minnesota Freedom Fund. They were letting out people from the riots who went on to commit murder and rape. I mean, that's who she is. So she won't keep you safe. She casts the deciding vote. You're going to see an ad on this from the Trump campaign. She casts the deciding vote in the Senate to break the deadlock, the tie on the rule to allow Biden's $1.9 trillion, right? That $1.9 trillion spending bill. That the deficit, right? You're the expert. It's over $1 trillion a year now, $1.5 trillion, right? And that was all inflationary. That kicked off inflation. She cast the deciding vote in the Senate to trigger inflation, where it went to a record that we haven't seen. So the food prices you're paying in the store, the gas prices you're paying at the pump, which she's against fracking. She's for all these limits on oil and gas production. you pay the price for her policies every day.
Yeah.
And think about it when Trump was president, because it really is true that you were better off 4 years ago than you are today.
For sure. Well, John, you got that all right, except the one small correction. It was not just that one spending bill. There were two, because he had passed like 3 multi-trillion-dollar spending bills, and there were 2 of these that she cast the tie-breaking vote on. So you could make the case that she is singularly responsible for the massive inflation and the massive blow up in our debt. So, John, right now, we've got about 1 minute left. Are you feeling confident? Are you nervous? Because I know a lot of our listeners who are, and by the way, I think we have a lot of listeners of all parties and all persuasions, but those of my listeners who are Trump fans, they're nervous right now.
Well, look, we're confident, but in a point that we always run like an underdog. We always run like we're behind in the Trump campaign.
Yes,
He works so hard. Yesterday he was in Montana. He's doing rallies.
Amazing.
He's going back out on it. The only thing that stopped him this week was Tropical Storm Debbie. He had to cancel North Carolina. But he did the press conference. But it's like we run hard, and we've been here before. But it's actually a better position, and we have a weaker opponent, and Trump is very strong. We have a weaker opponent. Yep. She's got a very bad record. We do need to get that out, and we do need to have the contrast of who was the better president, Donald Trump when he was there, or this Biden-Harris administration, which has really just weakened the country beyond belief on a whole series of fronts, whether it's the economy, inflation, immigration, border, et cetera.
You are 100% correct, my friend. John McLaughlin, thanks so much for taking some time out of your weekend to be on the More Money Show. Appreciate it. I owe you a burger or a Starbucks or something. No. Folks, we'll be right back. This is the More Money Show on WABC.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC. I'm so pleased to introduce my next guest. Everyone knows Monica Crowley. You see her almost every night on Fox News. She is the host of the Monica Crowley podcast. And what is that on, Monica? It's on Rumble?
Yes. Hi, Steve. Yes, you can find my podcast on Rumble and also Google, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay. And also she was one of the top officials in the Treasury Department in terms of doing all the media for the Treasury Department when Steve Mnuchin ran the Treasury Department for President Donald J. Trump. Monica, I know how busy you are, so appreciate you slicing some time out on this busy weekend. So I want to get right down to it. I'm going to ask you some tough questions. And what I want to discuss with you, if I may, is women. I want to talk about women. Can we do that? Because I don't understand women. And what I don't understand is why people, what I don't understand, Monica, is, I have 2 sisters who I love dearly, but I think they're going to vote for Kamala Harris, and they're kind of prototypical, white suburban housewives. They do pretty well. They've got a good, life. But they don't like Trump, and now it's not certain that they could change their mind. So I guess the question I want to pose to you, Monica Crowley, is what does Donald Trump have to do to win these critical suburban women who I think are going to decide the election?
Well, it's a great question, and I know that the Trump campaign is really focused like a laser beam on that particular constituency. And, Steve, they're looking at African Americans, they're looking at Latinos, and there has been real movement among those groups toward President Trump and the GOP. Yep. But you're right to isolate women as perhaps the most stubborn constituency for the Democrats, and especially Black women in particular are really solid Democrats. So you're right to raise the question. I think as a woman, I think so many women for decades have really been told by the Democrats that party is the safe harbor for women, that they're focused on women's issues, the abortion issue, education, child care. There are so many giveaways from the government that are targeted to women and sort of family life overall, that it's made a lot of women increasingly dependent on government. They feel secure when the government is providing all kinds of programs and handouts, et cetera. And again, I'm using a broad brush here because not every woman feels that way. I certainly don't. But they've had great success over many decades in indoctrinating women into the Democrat Party and the left. So we're fighting against that kind of historical trend. And then when you have a candidate like Kamala Harris, who is a woman and a woman of color, now they're appealing to those kinds of women that you're talking about as, well, don't you really want to make history with Kamala Harris the way we made history with Barack Obama? So they're running her as Obama in a skirt, right? So the question here is, to your point about how President Trump begins to counter that. And I think the best way for him to do that and for the campaign to take this on is to talk directly to women as Americans, not as women particularly, but as Americans who care about the future of their country for their children and their grandchildren. And then to make the comparison between the Biden-Harris years, which has been an historic catastrophe, versus the Trump years, where we had a booming economy, we had an enforced border, we had law and order, we had stronger education, and we had world peace. So if you care about your children and your grandchildren, right, these are American issues. They're not women's issues. So if I were President Trump, I'd be teasing these issues out, speaking directly to women, but making the issues above and beyond simply abortion and sort of other quote unquote women's issues, and talk about making America safer and more prosperous and more secure for them and for their children.
So Monica, I'm talking to Monica Crowley, of course, who former Trump official. You see her on Fox News almost every night, and one of the smartest political minds I know. So Monica, I agree with what you just said. It's almost like, women want to, have their, they want the security blanket of government more so than men do. But it's also true, isn't it, Monica, that, for example, in the Moore household, I don't do the shopping. My wife does the shopping. She goes to the grocery store. She's the one who comes back angry about what everything costs. And so, in fact, sometimes she drags me to the grocery store. She said, "You're coming with me. You got to see what these things cost." And so women also tend to do the bills. And that's certainly the case in my household. And so I would think that women would be pretty angry, as my wife is, about the inflation.
Yes, absolutely. And so when I talk about delivering a booming economy again, I think what President Trump needs to do with his targeted messaging to women is exactly that. So he talks about how he delivered a pro-growth economic agenda, and you were a critical part of that, Steve. And he did it through tax cuts, regulatory relief, unleashing our great energy sector, and fair trade deals. That generated a boom, an economic boom in this country that we really haven't seen since the Reagan years. And the critical element to that is that Trump, by doing that, he delivered a Goldilocks economy. So he delivered robust growth with little to no inflation. And so, you target women by talking about how your energy costs are way up under Biden-Harris, and you talk about how your grocery bills are out of control, and the fact that you have to decide between groceries or putting gas in your car week to week. And in the world's greatest superpower, the greatest country the world has ever known, the American people should not have to face those kinds of decisions. We're not a third world country, although the left is trying to turn us into one, but we are not one. And all Donald Trump has to say is, under my first term, here's what I delivered for you: affordable groceries, affordable gas, little to no inflation. the American dream. Here's what Biden-Harris has delivered for you. Skyrocketing inflation, sky-high gas and energy prices, right? And you know it. Here's the thing, Steve, and I've been talking about this on my podcast and to anybody who will listen for a long time. There are so many people in this country who do not connect their vote with the consequences of their vote.
That's right.
Or they do and they don't care. So maybe there are a lot of people who are willing to pay sky-high grocery prices because they want a virtue signal or feel better about themselves about voting for the first woman of color. But the country is hanging by a thread, and we do not have time for those kinds of calculations. We've got to appeal to every single American about what's at stake.
So, Monica, I'm talking to the great Monica Crowley, and we've only got about 2.5 minutes left, but I wanted to bring up one other quick issue with you. I've been watching the Olympics, and I'm a Go America Go guy. I'm a patriotic American. I love when we win these gold medals, and I love what Katie Ledecky has done, and so many, the men and women have done an amazing job. And one of the things that strikes me is that, Trump is patriotic. He loves America, and, he's always rooting for our country. And sometimes I think liberals don't really believe that that America is a special place. And so I would like Trump to really emphasize this, that we need a new patriotism in America. And I wonder what you think about that.
Yeah, I love that idea. I mean, I did a long interview with Caitlyn Jenner about the woke Olympics on my podcast last week. And we were talking about how the Olympics used to be such an amazing, special moment for most Americans. You'd cozy up with your family and make some popcorn and cheer on Bruce Jenner and Dorothy Hamill and Mary Lou Retton and the ice hockey team in 1980. And that is like gone, right? I mean, we've got Simone Biles and people do cheer, but it's not the same cohesion of the country anymore. It's become very atomized. And that's so true. I love your idea about a new patriotism and having President Trump appeal to it, because we don't want it to be nostalgia. We want it to be our reality now. And this is how we're going to save America. There's a huge impulse for it. And, you've been really focused on school choice and education. That is going to be a critical element of this, because you've got generations of kids that have been indoctrinated into Marxism.
I know.
And we're going to have to reverse.
They don't even say, Monica, they don't even say the Pledge of Allegiance in the schools anymore. I mean, it's just pathetic.
It's disgusting. Yeah, it's disgusting. So we have our work cut out for us.
Okay. Well, Monica Crowley, thank you so much. Her podcast is the Monica Crowley podcast, and it is on Rumble. And she will be probably the president's chief spokesman when Donald Trump wins in November. Monica, thanks for joining. This is the More Money Show on WABC.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC Talk Radio, the #1 talk radio station in these United States. And now I am very pleased to introduce my next guest, and that is the great Charlie Gasparino. You all know Charlie Gasparino from Fox News, from Fox Business Network. I think, Charlie, but prior to that, were you with CNBC?
I was at CNBC. I was at the Wall Street Journal.
You just follow me wherever I go. That's the problem, Charlie. You and I have similar resumes. And you have a new book out, most importantly, which is called Go Woke or Go Broke?
Both. Go woke, go broke. The radicalization.
Go woke, go broke. Okay. There's a big difference between those two things. So what does that mean? Tell me what you're talking about.
Well, I mean, listen, I'm, as you know, I'm a business reporter.
Yes.
If I cover finance, business. I also cover the confluence between business and politics. Yeah. And, I've been kind of sitting on this story for a long time. I've been noticing, a sort of shift in corporate America's culture to the left. And I've noticed it dramatically over the years. And then it sort of boiled over during 2020 after George Floyd. And then there was a reversal. And, it occurred when, wokeness in the boardroom reached its most absurd heights. And this was like,
it was like a backlash.
Yeah, but the backlash came as it went. It was foam. It was, the wokeness was still there, but then it reached some weird, absurd heights in 2022 and 2023, where these companies went nuts, totally nuts, even more so. Like if you think they went crazy during the George Floyd riots with DEI sessions and critical race theory seminars, then they started putting trans influencers in beer commercials and in a bubble bath half naked, and Disney flicking in same-sex kissing scenes weirdly, just gratuitously in cartoons, and and Larry Fink,
even in children, even like children's shows, they're putting in Disney. They were doing this.
That's basically where the backlash began, with the children, not with adults. And then ESG, environmental social government investing, literally stoking inflation in 2021, 22, and a big backlash against that. And so I said, wow, there's a story here. There's a story about how we got to this place where corporations, which are supposed to be making money and providing shareholder return, the old Milton Friedman shareholder capitalism, went from that to some like weird sort of leftist, sideshow. And
they call it stakeholder capitalism, not shareholder capitalism.
Oh, I know. Well, that's one of the key inflection points in corporate America going woke, when they defenestrated Milton Friedman shareholder capitalism by the Business Roundtable, which is all the big companies, by the way. When they defenestrated them and put in this weird lefty theory of stakeholder capitalism, and all that led to what we had, this sort of like weird thing that occurred mainly after the George Floyd thing, where corporations went wild with the progressive virtue signaling, and then there was a backlash. And I one thing I noticed, one thing great about being non-woke as a reporter, the woke mainstream media gives you like a lot of running room with stories that they won't touch, and this is one of them. And that's in my book. It's a investigative story, but I try to do. It's funny. Trust me. One of the funniest things in the world is to write about CEOs acting idiotically woke, and it's all in there. Trust me. Larry Fink, Jamie Dimon, you name it, they're all in, making complete fools of themselves in being woke.
I think you're right. You're one of the few who's actually had the courage to write about this, because it's very politically incorrect to take these people on. You must be small-minded if you don't agree with their left-wing agenda. And you're also right that corporations just caved into this stuff so willingly. And I happen to think, Charlie, and I'd like your response on this, I really think one of the most important things that happened in corporate America over the last couple of years was what happened with Bud Light. And I think that caught corporate America by total shock. They had no idea that there were actually conservatives in the country who maybe half of their customers. And that company, Bud Light, probably permanently, ruined that great brand. And their market value went down by billions and billions of dollars. And I think that was a wake-up call, don't you?
Yes, and I trace how they got there. I mean, you got to realize Anheuser-Busch, for many years, was a family-owned business that was all American. We all remember Spuds MacKenzie.
The Clydesdales and all that, right?
Clydesdale, the Spuds MacKenzie, the cute dog picking up the hot girls in the bikinis. I mean, that was what they stood for, Super Bowl ads, And then one day, everybody woke up, and, I don't follow I don't cover Budweiser every day, so it was kind of a shock to me. This trans influencer, Dylan Mulvaney, who's a very influential trans influencer. Remember, this woman, who's now a woman, man who is now a woman, did 365 days of girlhood, chronicling her transition from man to woman. Interviewed Joe Biden, where they talked about trans surgeries, where it was discussed about possibly laws that are curtailing this involving children, and it was just this person is an activist, and somehow she found her way into a Budweiser social media commercial. And how does that happen? And I trace it. And by the way, the company tried to blame it on a wayward, when the damage was done, and the damage was severe. Bud Light was when this began, because this was a lot of this was involving Bud Light. Bill Mulvaney was half naked sipping a Bud Light in a bubble bath. Bud Light went from the number 1 beer; it's now the number 3 beer. So the damage is really done. But they tried to blame it on this woman in the marketing department who said some, said some unfortunate things about that she wanted to change the fratty culture around Budweiser. But when I did my reporting, I found a couple of things. First off, this woman that they blamed on is a very good marketer. I mean, she comes up with great ads in the past. So I was saying to myself, how does someone this smart, this good go there with this? And what I found is that she was under pressure, for DEI pressure, to diversify. Really? Because Anheuser-Busch is no longer run by the Anheuser-Busch, the Busch family, right? It's run by AB InBev, which now they changed the name to AB InBev, who are a bunch of Brazilian and Belgian Davos types. And they instilled DEI writ large. And I quote them talking about ESG and sustainability and diversity. So she was under pressure to do stuff like this. And, one of the, some of this is funny because, this happened, but some of it's sad. I interviewed Ted Cruz for the book. He did an investigation. I don't know if people remember this. He did an investigation into this whole thing. And not because, he wasn't, concerned about how they got to Dylan Mulvaney, but he was more, what his investigation involved is whether Anheuser-Busch or AB InBev violated the law by using Dylan Mulvaney in a social media spot. And here's how, Steve. Remember, to go onto the Anheuser-Busch website, you have to type in your birthday. I mean, you can lie, but it wants to make sure kids aren't indulging in alcohol, right? This is a very regulated industry, the beverage, of course, the spirits industry, right?
Yeah.
If you know anything about Dylan Mulvaney, she is all over TikTok with her stuff on her social media stuff. Her following is TikTok is a following that trends to be very young, underage young.
Yeah.
And Cruz, it's an anecdote in the book where Cruz, in a staff, found how she was, masquerading as Eloise, one of the young characters.
Oh, yes.
in a children's book where she says, "I'm Eloise, I am 6," and she's dressed up like Eloise. And Cruz is what is going on here? Is this grooming? I mean, and this is who Budweiser got involved with. And part of me feels sorry for Dylan Mulvaney. I'll tell you why, Steve. They treated her it's in addition to trying to stupidly trying to pin it on a marketing person, which we know I believe is not the case. This is about DEI. I mean, mainly, which is handed up from above. They try to make it oh, this is just one influence. This is Dylan Mulvaney, and just screw her, throw it to the side. But they hired her for a reason. She got a paycheck. They, lawyers had to look at this. I mean, trust me, nothing is done at a beer company without lawyers. And then they made it sound like she's just a rounding error when they went there for a reason. You don't hire her because she's not flamboyant. You know what I'm saying? It's just, it just shows you how these companies are both stupidly woke and stupidly try to unwrap the rope, unwind the rope.
Yeah. So the question, of course, is, is this a fad? That's, I've been saying we've reached peak woke, and that it's kind of on the downslide now. But how do you assess the situation?
Yeah, I do agree with that. And the book shows that. The last sort of quarter of the book is woke being unwound. The last chapter is called Woke is Finally Broken. And it's still going to be here. DEI officers still exist at companies and all that. But there's a radical reversal going on. I mean, Larry Fink, who was Mr. Woke CEO, right?
Yeah.
In environmental social governance investing, has rolled it all back.
He has. He really has.
Model. He won't say ESG anymore.
I had lunch with him not long ago with about 5 or 6 other conservative leaders, and he was saying, "Look, we're putting this past us. We're in the business of making money. We're not trying to make social statements and political statements." And and the truth is, they have moved away from this radical. I mean, he was one of the leaders of the net zero and all of the climate change stuff, and he's backed off that a bit too.
Now, I give him credit in my book. I actually like Larry.
I do too.
He sat down with me. I mean, he was honest about it. He was contrite, like where I went wrong. I mean, that you got to give someone credit for that.
Yeah,
most of these
I agree.
other guys just hide. They got their rear ends kicked, so now they're just hiding, and they've capitulated because they got their butts smacked a little bit here. Budweiser's the funniest one because as I showed the book, they go from Dylan Mulvaney. Now they're in a sponsorship deal with the UFC and Dana White, who's decidedly unwoke. And see, this is the funniest thing. I in some of my reporting, I uncovered that they're thinking of doing with one of their brands, maybe not Bud Light, but another brand. They're thinking of sponsoring Dana's new sport that he created called Power Slap. Have you seen this? Two guys stand up and they literally slap each other until one of them falls down. It's called Power Slap. So think about this.
See, that sounds fun.
But the most unwoke thing in the world. So they go from Dylan Mulvaney naked in a bubble bath, giggling with a beer, to Power Slap. I mean, it just shows you that this thing is reversing.
So one of the issues that we've been working on is this whole war against fossil fuels, and you still have a lot of the political class saying get rid of fossil fuels. We get 83% of our energy from oil, gas, and coal. So we're a long, long way from being at net zero. How do you assess that movement?
A lot of this gets handed down from the White House and from broader public policy, and there's some of this depends on who gets elected. Obviously, if Biden and if Kamala Harris and Walz get elected, there will be industrial policy. I think that
yes,
pushes companies to adopt net zero, or at least they'll try. I mean, some of this is like you need congressional buy-in, and we don't know where Congress will go in that event. Some of it, the administrative state is there's been some knocks, some clawbacks of the administrative state's power, as you know, from the Supreme Court. So that there's a little pressure to back off there, but clearly the messaging from the White House, if it's supposed to, will be on this net zero, pushing on net zero issue. Now, if it's Trump, it's just the opposite. And
I was going to say, if Trump wins, there's not going to be a net zero policy. That is for sure. He loves the oil and gas industry. So, Charlie, how do people get the book? It's called Go Woke, Go Broke. And what's the best way to get the book?
Best way, just order it on Amazon. Comes the next day. Yeah. It's actually so easy. I hate to say that. I hate to hurt like independent booksellers, but I mean, it literally is the easiest way to buy a book ever devised.
So can I ask you one other quick question? Because we've got about a minute and a half to go, and we're going to have to finish. We're going to have a more complete conversation. I'd love to have you again. So the woke movement really started in Silicon Valley, and one of the things that I find kind of interesting about this is that we're free market guys, right? We want our industries to succeed, but they make this peace with many anti business Democrats because they want to be socially acceptable and so on. And I could never understand why these companies like Google and Apple and Amazon and all these others, now they're under attack from the very left wingers that they sucked up to. And do you think Silicon Valley is starting to realize some of the errors of their way?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you could see it in, listen, there's always going to be a huge woke contingent in Silicon Valley. But clearly, there's change. I mean, even Mark Zuckerberg came out and said he thought, what did he say about Trump? It was the badass move that with after he got shot. Stood up. I mean, and it really was. But in the past, he would never say that, right? I mean, so, and by the way, it's not just him. It's Mark Andreessen. There's a growing contingent.
That's good news.
And it is. And I should point out, though, that woke didn't begin at Silicon Valley. It began at the UN, my book traces, and then it became like this sort of talking point at Davos in various ways with ESG and DEI. Silicon Valley just manifested itself because just the notion, Silicon Valley's always been a lefty sort of California vibe, but even that's changing, Steve.
Yeah. Well, Charlie, we're up against a hard break. Great stuff. I can't wait to read the book. That's Charlie Gasparino of Fox News, and his new book is Go Woke, Go Broke. This is the More Money Show on WABC. We'll be right back.